The structure of the verb phrase. The basic structure of the verb phrase is the same as in other phrases. It must have a head, which is the main verb. It can have one or more pre-modifiers, which are auxiliaries or adverbs. And it can have one or more post-modifiers. One of the things that makes verb phrases complicated is that what can go in the post-modifier slot depends partly on what type of main verb is in the phrase: intransitive, transitive, ditransitive, or copular. You may want to go back and review the different types of main verbs in the verbs module to help you understand what we're going to say about verb phrases. Here is a verb phrase with all the slots filled. Is always singing in the shower. The auxiliary is and the adverb always are in the pre-modifier slot. The prepositional phrase in the shower is in the post-modifier slot. The main verb, singing, is the head of the phrase. The whole structure is a verb phrase. Here is a diagram showing the different parts of the verb phrase. The verb group. Since auxiliaries are also a kind of verb, it's possible for a verb phrase to have more than one verb in it. The main verb is always the head of the phrase. The main verb, together with any auxiliaries, is called the verb group. So the verb group is a part of the verb phrase, but there can be more things in the verb phrase than just the verb group. In the verb phrase, must have been going over the speed limit, the verb group is the auxiliaries plus the main verb. Must have been going. Order of auxiliaries. If the verb group contains more than one auxiliary, the auxiliaries have to come in a certain order. We have to say, he must have been going over the speed limit, not he have been must going over the speed limit, or he must been have going over the speed limit. There is only one possible order the auxiliaries can go in. Modal auxiliaries, like must in these examples, always come before any other auxiliaries. There can only be one modal auxiliary. If there are two primary auxiliaries, the first is always have, and the second is usually be, sometimes get. He must have been going over the speed limit. Or he must have got rejected by the girl he asked out. This diagram shows you the structure of the verb group and the order of the auxiliaries and the main verb. Remember that only the main verb is obligatory, and it is always the last verb. Remember that the verb group is a part of the verb phrase. You can think of this diagram as having taken the pre-modifier box from the VP diagram we looked at before and divided it in three to show the order the auxiliaries come in if there's more than one. Identifying auxiliaries. The primary auxiliaries, especially be, are the most irregular verbs in the English language. It's important to be familiar with the different forms of the auxiliaries so you're able to identify them in the verb phrase. Here are all the forms of the verb be. So in the present tense we have I am, you are, he, she or it is, and we or you or they are. In the past tense we have I was, you were, he, she or it was, and we or you or they were. The present participle is being and the past participle is been. Have does not have quite so many different forms. The present tense is have, except for the third person singular, he, she or it, has. The past tense is had, the present participle is having, and the past participle is had. For do, the present tense is do, except the third person singular does. The past tense is did, the present participle is doing, and the past participle is done. For get, the present tense is get, except for the third person singular gets. The past tense is got. The present participle is getting, and the past participle is got. Postmodifiers in the verb phrase. Optional postmodifiers. There are two types of postmodifier that can appear in the verb phrase. Those which depend on which kind of verb the main verb is, and those which can be present in any verb phrase. Those which can be present in any verb phrase include prepositional phrases, as in he slept in his car, or she sang at the top of her voice. They can be adverbial phrases, as in he sings very beautifully, she runs extremely fast. Note that these modifiers are optional. If we left them out, the clause would still make sense. Postmodifiers in the verb phrase, objects and complements. Some postmodifiers are not optional. The main verb requires them to be there. A transitive verb needs to have a noun phrase in the postmodifier position, such as Kim killed the cockroach, or the ball broke the kitchen window. A noun phrase which is a postmodifier in a verb phrase, and which is there because the verb requires it, is called an object. A copular verb also needs to have something in the postmodifier position. This can be either a noun phrase, as in Kim is a doctor, or an adjective phrase, as in Kim is very kind, or a prepositional phrase, as in Kim is in her office. These postmodifiers which follow the copula are called complements of the copula. Complements are not the same as objects. Objects are always noun phrases, but complements can be noun phrases, adjective phrases, or prepositional phrases. If a phrase follows a copular verb, it is always a complement, not an object. You'll notice that prepositional phrases in postmodifier position can be complements, which means that the verb requires them to be there, or they can be optional. This depends on the verb. A verb phrase can have more than one postmodifier, as in the ball broke the kitchen window with a huge crash, or we can talk in my office after class. In the first example, the kitchen window is an object. The verb requires it to be there. With a huge crash is an optional post-modifying prepositional phrase. We could leave it out. In the second example, both prepositional phrases are optional post-modifiers. Is the prepositional phrase in the noun phrase or the verb phrase? We've just seen that one of the things that can be a post-modifier in the verb phrase is a prepositional phrase. We remember from the module on noun phrases that noun phrases can also have a prepositional phrase as a post-modifier. Sometimes it isn't clear whether a prepositional phrase modifies a noun or a verb, whether it is inside the noun phrase or inside the verb phrase. Take the example, the teacher taught the students with jet lag. Who has the jet lag, the teacher or the students? Both interpretations are possible. So where does this ambiguity come from? It comes from the fact that the prepositional phrase with jet lag can be interpreted either as a post-modifier in the verb phrase or as a post-modifier in the noun phrase whose head is students. If it's a post-modifier in the noun phrase, then the object of the verb is the students with jet lag. That is, the students have jet lag. With jet lag is inside the noun phrase, modifying the head noun students. If it's a post-modifier in the verb phrase, then the verb phrase has two separate post-modifiers. Taught the students with jet lag. That is, there are two things being said about the teaching. It was done to the students and it was done with jet lag. Both these phrases are post-modifiers to the verb taught. This gives the interpretation where it is the teacher who has the jet lag. This kind of structural ambiguity with prepositional phrases is pretty common in written English, from adults as well as children.